Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Royal Poo podcast. My name is Joe Thomas. I am the Echo's Everton FC correspondent. Alongside me today we've got regular contributor Gav Buckland, and we've pulled someone in from news, Dan Haygarth, for his pod debut. I tell you what, over the time I've been at the Echo, we had a lot of time people shouting Red Echo shouts. Yeah. You'd be amazed how many Blues there are in the office, so we've got another one here today. Dan, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. All good, yeah? How are you?
Yeah, very, very good. Cheers. Been better if they'd have beat Fulham. This is my first podcast since then. We'll start there. I know there was a podcast in immediate aftermath of that, but we will just round off on that just to see, now that the dust has settled a little bit, just where your thoughts lie. Dan, you were there the other day. I mean, do you feel any less disappointed and deflated now?
Not really, no. It's still stinging, I think. I felt like a real opportunity missed, and to have be at match point essentially with the Onana penalty, and for him to take it like that does hurt, yeah, for sure. I don't think we were very good in the 90 minutes, but neither were Fulham, and we were one kick away from a semi-final, which is tough to let go, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Gav, do you, again, obviously, I know that there'll have been an initial feeling of disappointment. Are you more on the lines now of, actually, this is a very stretched squad that didn't look for a long time like it was going to get into that game, wasn't playing very well, but somehow found a way to take it to penalties? Or are you still massive missed opportunity, can't believe it, and you're fuming?
First of all, I like Dan's tennis analogy. That was my thought exactly. It's like saving a double fault on match point, wasn't it? Onana's penalty. No, I'm disappointed. I thought Dice got his team selection wrong. I would have had one more attacker on the pitch.
Really?
Yeah, I think I always like to see 4 attackers, or 4 offensive players. And for a one-off cup tie at home, and it's got to be settled in 90 minutes, and you're playing a Fulham team who, let's face it, just wanted to contain Everton, I would have had probably Dan Gima on the pitch from the start and drop one of the 3 central midfielders. And the consequence of that, I thought it was an opportunity missed from the selection-wise. At the same time, we didn't get beat, did we? We've kept statistically, we've kept our unbeaten run, or whatever you call it, going. And yeah, and it points to what we've said many times as well. And it's relevant to tomorrow, isn't it? The team looked very tired, didn't he? Mm-hmm. It looked like a lot of players who've played. I mean, if you have things since Calvert-Lewin and Branthwaite came into the team, probably late September, we've pretty much had the same team since then. And in the modern Premier League, you can't afford to have that, can you? At some point, it's going to catch up with you. And that was my thoughts after the game. And of course, it's relevant to the conversation about Spurs for tomorrow. I
think one of the frustrating things as well is, obviously, that's the 3rd time that Fulham have left Goodison Park happy in 2023. Clearly got the wall over Everton and Sean Dyche as well. I think really one thing we've learned is Everton just don't have a way in their squad of dealing with Willian. It was he tore Ben Godfrey apart at right back. Obviously, again, that was makeshift, and again, he was effective. He was effective on Tuesday, wasn't he? Yeah,
possibly would have played James Garner out wide right instead. And I like Jack Harrison that number 10 role, perhaps. I don't know, but it was just an opportunity wasted. I love Willian. I said during the game that if you had the Premier League all-time underrated 11, Willian would get in it for me. And I'd include the goal at Anfield in that selection probably, but yeah, and he's caused us all. Well, that whole Fulham left side has caused us problems in all three.
Anthony Robinson,
games.
the
Anthony
former
Robertson,
Blues academy player.
Yeah, and I thought he was good on Tuesday again, and we have struggled this calendar year in all 3 games with that Fulham left hand side, and that was the same again, I thought, in parts on Tuesday, and that's where they got the goal from, didn't they, really?
I'm not going to touch on the Amadou Onana penalty. I think that's probably been well discussed, and everyone has their thoughts on that. But one thing I tweeted after the game was, because I thought it deserved a bit of recognition, was Michael Keane stepping up and taking the 3rd penalty and scoring in the way he did. And the reason I thought it was so impressive was, the thing with Michael Keane is, especially when you look at the last 2.5 years of his Everton career, so often I don't think it'd be quite right to say he's a scapegoat, but when things have gone wrong, he's often been at the centre of them. And to have had that history at Everton And to step up and take a penalty in that situation, and to be one of the most crucial penalties as well, that third one, knowing that more often than not things tend to work out against you, the storyline ends up with you as the antagonist. I thought that took a bit of bravery, and I got a lot of support for it, but I also got a lot of stick for it. And I think one thing that I probably like to, you can't have a sensible argument, a conversation on Twitter, but I think you can separate somebody's heart and their bravery and their courage from their ability as a football player, and I thought that was very good from Keane. Keane be anywhere near your side this weekend, Dan? We'll move on to Spurs.
I thought he was okay on Tuesday.
It's not his fault for the own goal, really.
No, I thought he was unlucky with that. Couldn't really see it. There was a main stand pillar in the way, but from what I could tell, couldn't really see it. But yeah, really brave, great penalty. And he's shown he can strike a ball very well. I'm still convinced he might actually be a striker, because chaos does seem to follow him a bit, and you'd rather that in an opposition box than your own. But yeah, I probably would keep the back line the same.
Would you?
I think so. I think I don't think Fulham actually created that much. Though it didn't feel much for Pickford to do. I'm not sure about Branthwaite on the left side. I think he lacked a bit of composure at times when he was trying to dink the ball in, but I'm not sure I would change them, to be honest, and Keane probably does stay in for now, for me.
Yeah, what's really interesting, obviously, we heard from Sean Dyche yesterday. We recorded this on Friday. I was there at Finch Farm yesterday. I mean, Vitaly Mykolenko looks like he's back in with a chance of playing, so I think if he is in, if there is a chance, you play Vitaly Mykolenko, who's been brilliant this season, hasn't he? But then also, if he's 50% fit with the game coming up, you also probably say pull him back, don't you? We know that Abdoulaye Doucoure is not going to be involved. Ashley Young, Seamus Coleman looks a little bit too early for them. One good thing, I can say this now, it was under embargo, but I've already written the story and it's already out there, and that is that Andre Gomes is on the cusp of a return, so he's in contention for the squad to go down to Spurs. I don't think he's quite ready, certainly not ready to start, and I think when you look at the reluctance that Sean Dyche has to make substitutes when he doesn't think they're definitely going to benefit the team, probably a while before he gets onto the pitch. But he played the last 3 games in the 21s, he completed 90 minutes on Tuesday, probably the story that we all missed because everybody was concentrating understandably on the Carabao Cup. But against Feyenoord for the 21s, he played 90 minutes, and that was a big milestone for Dyche. He wanted him to have 90 minutes under his belt before he could then step up the next bit. So he's in contention to travel, and Dyche says he may well be in the squad. Dan, I think that's definitely a good news for Everton. I think it's probably better news for January when we look towards Idrissa Gueye going to the African Cup of Nations, probably than rather this little clutch of fixtures now. But it's a small squad. We've already said it's starting to look stretched. Anybody coming back to fitness is a boost, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. As we've said, they looked sort of done on Tuesday when the penalties came around. They all looked absolutely shattered. So the more options we have, the better, really. Gomez, he was in France last year, wasn't he? Yeah. And you wonder how long it would take him to readapt back to Premier League football if he was back in the squad, because he was never that dynamic a centre midfielder, really, even at his best before the injury, the leg break. But yeah, this squad is really small, and if we are going to keep up this league form, you're going to need options, especially when Idrissa goes away for the Africa Cup of Nations. So it can only be a good thing, because I don't know how. You'll probably know more than me, sort of the scope we have for January and bringing new players in, because if we don't, second half of the season could prove a bit of a struggle, I think. Yeah, I mean, Dyche was asked about January and he was very non-committal and basically gave the impression that he didn't know what the situation was for January. Now, he says that publicly. I'm sure privately he's got a very good idea of what the situation will be. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty around Everton off the pitch still remains, because the takeover process, the prospective takeovers, is still going through the regulatory process. But I think it's relatively safe to say there isn't going to be a huge amount of money to spend, because even if 777 were to get approval, one thing that they haven't shown over the history of their growing portfolio of clubs is once they get in at a club, they don't tend to spend a lot of money on transfers. Perhaps they address operating costs, but not going in and spending lots of money. I think that I've said it a lot of times here on the pod, but I think the main aim for this season, especially now that they've wiped out that points deduction, already built a 7-point cushion to the bottom 3, is very much a case of trying to secure Premier League football as soon as possible to give Kevin Farwell as big a head start as he possibly can on the summer, because there's going to be a huge amount of turnover within that Everton squad. Probably represents Farwell's first opportunity to shape it in his own image after a couple of difficult transfer windows of taking the fees where they've come in, getting big wages off the books, obviously dealing with the legacy of the Mashiri contracts.
a few more of them disappear off the books this summer, and I think that Farrell will start to take it away from the Frankenstein Mashiri manager squad that we've seen for so long, and perhaps start to create a proper identity. Gav, this Spurs game, this doubleheader probably comes at a bit of a bad time, do you think, just in the sense that there's a potential here for Everton's form has been phenomenal, and they've done so much in the past 5 or 6 weeks to give themselves the benefit of the cushion for when the injuries and suspensions began to bite, which we always knew they would do given the strength of this squad. So whilst these aren't free hits, they have taken the pressure off 2 very difficult fixtures. But given the nature of the squad and the time, and these have the potential to be 2 unforgiving fixtures, I think.
I think we found that Spurs, the last 5-10 years, it's just an unforgiving fixture whatever team we put out there. What I would say, I think the fixtures will work well for us. We're saying the players are tired now. I'd rather have done it this way than played Spurs and Man City in the start of December, then go into a crucial run of games around Christmas time against some of the clubs expected to win, and we find some of our characteristics neutralised because we're tired. So I think the fixtures have worked quite well. Not ideal having 7 or 8 games in a month, but I think it's worked well for us with that respect. Regarding the games themselves, I'm veering towards free hit territory, to be honest with you. I think if we get anything for the next 2 games, I will be absolutely delighted, because at the start of December, when you saw the fixtures, we've had several conversations on this pod, haven't we, Joe, around, we thought we've got a thin squad, it's going to be difficult, a few tough home games, a couple of tough away matches, and I was thinking if we get like sort of 7 points from those 7 games, I'll be absolutely delighted. It's a point a game, and we've got 12 from 4. So as far as I'm concerned, we're 5 under par in golfing. Gone from tennis to golf now, haven't we? A golfing parlance for 5 under par. To be honest with you, in terms of our points tally for this month. So anything we get in the next two games, I think will be very well received. I think what I'm looking forward though tomorrow is just to see that we've shown ourselves capable of bouncing back from the Fulham defeat. That you wouldn't want us to be, fitness-wise, okay, but mentally we suffered a little bit because of the nature of the defeat. I think that will be important. But I'm veering towards 2 free hit games. But at the same time, I still think there's something certainly. I know City aren't pulling up any trees at the moment, and they're in whatever they are at the moment playing World Club football. That is maybe a more easy game than normal. Does make it easy, of course. So yeah. Free hits for me, but I still think we can get something.
Yeah, well, Spurs will be an interesting one, and really Evan should have got something at Spurs last season. I remember going down there, the grim week under Lampard, and obviously things got a hell of a lot grimmer later on this season, but I think myself and Chris travelled to, and obviously a lot of fans who paid their hard-earned money to do this, travelled up to Newcastle in midweek, then down to Spurs, and didn't see a single shot on target across 180 minutes, and it was just that kind of that moment when you were like, I mean, Dominic Calvert-Lewin was in and around the squad at that point, but he clearly wasn't firing. Obviously, he'd been injured at the start of the season, and you're just like, Everton without a plan B is a worrying prospect here. But having said that, what they did do when they went down to Spurs, obviously under a different manager at the time, was they had 2 one-on-ones in the first half. Amadou Onana's in particular, I remember he fired over the bar, and really you kind of thought that if Everton had a great chance to get something for that game, it was only really a bit of Harry Kane histrionics with Jordan Pickford and a few tactical tweets and the changed that game against Everton. There's an opportunity there, I think, tomorrow. Dan, one thing that's going to be interesting, obviously this is Everton's first glimpse of Ange ball with Tottenham. They have actually had a relatively recent glimpse of it, because when Everton went out just over 12 months ago to Australia, they played Ange Postecoglou's Celtic side, drew 0-0 with them, beat them on penalties in the Sydney Super Cup. Obviously very, very different beasts, and Everton themselves are a very different beast, a different personnel. Fortunate that I said I was there and got to see and speak with Ange after the game, but it's going to be a different proposition for Everton. We've spoken about the stretched nature of the squad. You've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin there, who I don't think, and again we discussed it relatively recently, his priority in that team. He can be successful in that team without scoring goals, and by being that focal point that allows other players to score goals around him and create chances, then he can have success. So he shouldn't just be judged on goals. He's had this longest run of games and form for a couple of years. Probably one of those players that started to just look a little bit leggy for completely understandable reasons. With Spurs playing such a high back line typically as well, would you be tempted for a couple of reasons to start with Beto?
I'd always be very hesitant about not starting Dominic, because I just think it's been so apparent for so long what we miss when he doesn't play. Granted, that was mainly found in a time when we didn't have Beto, who is a far better replacement than we've had in the past. But I don't know. I'm not sure I would. I thought against Fulham, he didn't really have much to work with, but he worked quite hard. And I agree with you completely that he doesn't have to be prolific to provide a lot to this Everton team. It'd be great if he started scoring again. He doesn't look quite sharp with his finishing at the moment. Something doesn't look quite right. Beto obviously came on and scored a goal and raised the roof. He does have that, but Beto to me feels very much like an impact sub. I'm not sure how much he's doing from the start that Calvert-Lewin wouldn't. So I don't know. I get that Dominic looks tired, and with his fitness history, you always want to be very careful with him. I'm not sure I would not start him though. I feel if there's a chance of getting something from Tottenham, because they've had a very good season, but they do have their weaknesses, I'd probably play him. Maybe rest him against City.
What do you think, Gav? I mean, is there a case to say that Everton would it be understandable if Everton were to go, actually, we'll target the City game here as opposed to the Spurs game? And regardless of what your thoughts on that, if you were going to rest Dominic Calvert-Lewin for one of them, which ones would you do?
I'd rest him for tomorrow, because I think he looks shattered on Tuesday, and I get the sort of, you don't judge Calvert-Lewin by his goals return. It's what he does for the team and that selfless striking role. But ultimately, strikers want to score goals, don't they? That's what they're there for. Oh, yeah. They want to score goals. I would pity a striker who just thinks that I'm just going to go out there and run around a bit for the sake of the team, and I'm happy with that role. You want to score goals. That's why, it's like defenders making tackles and goalkeepers making saves, isn't it? That's your raison d'etre, isn't it? I
mean, Dyche's Premier League history is one of the selfless striker.
Yeah.
You look at the Ashley Barnes, the Chris Wood, the kind of the 8-9 goal a season striker that brings other players into it.
Yeah, I get that, but Calvert-Lewin's had a number of managers before those strikers, hasn't he? Where it's been slightly different. Ultimately, and I know players want to win and stuff, but as a striker, you have a selfish attitude, don't you? I think, and I wonder sometimes in that role whether mentally you just become drained, because I would like to score or even to get a chance. And as it happens, all the chances have been going to Doucoure, haven't they? And mostly, and I think that's my concern with Calvert-Lewin in that role. And I would play Beto. I think Beto is similar but different, if you know what I mean. So like Ange plays you can call him Ange, can't you? I mean, when he calls him Ange, he plays high line, doesn't he? And
well, you can, because you're mates with him.
Yeah, I wish you was. Yeah. He'd be good to go for a pint with, wouldn't he? I think Ange sit down in the pub with them and talk lots of stuff. But he plays a high line, doesn't he? And Beto, when he has played, I think he's shown himself far more capable than Calvert-Lewin of getting in round the back of defenders. That he's more naturally hangs off the shoulder. But he did it was a Forest. Was it Forest?
He did Forest. He was very good before Forest. His first start before then, or his last start before then, was Brentford.
Yeah.
Which was the game that Calvert-Lewin came back in and scored, and that took Beto out the side. Beto was very good from the start in that. Again, team kind of played a relatively high back line, and what he did was he obviously a lot, and this is probably the same with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, a lot of the success rests on having Doucoure around him, so that if you're out there to challenge for the balls in the air and the second balls, a lot of things are then bounced into Doucoure. He's running onto them, which is obviously a problem that Everton have without Doucoure. Doucoure is so essential to that team and the way it links defence from attack. But that Brentford game he started and it was very good, and then obviously the Forest one, he had that chance in the first half which he should have scored. he did, and luckily he was able to put that behind him pretty soon after.
Yeah, it was a Burnley last week. He got in behind, didn't he, when he came on as sub? I think he's far more capable, Calvert-Lewin, of doing that. And against Angie plays, as we saw even against Chelsea when they were down to 9 men, likes to play a high line, and I just think his game just might be more slightly suited than Calvert-Lewin for playing against Spurs, and throwing the mix that Calvert-Lewin is struggling a little bit and could do with a week off. It points to me for playing better on Saturday. I mean, ideally then, if you played better on whenever you play Wednesday City, that's probably good news. Probably means you've got a result and he's played well. But all things being equal, I'd play better on Saturday, take it from there, and keep Calvert-Lewin for the Man City game, which I think could be a very interesting game. Interesting what Dyche's tactics are, and will be in the City game, by the way. But
the City game's quite interesting as well. They got outplayed by City in the same fixture last season, 3-0. As Everton were kind of heading towards the relegation battle, in the throes of the relegation battle. They didn't actually play that badly, did they? They were just done by a side that was just much better than them, which, that's not necessarily a good thing. Obviously, one thing that Dyche has shown is he's quite good at levelling the playing fields, but it wasn't the worst game in the world, was it? No,
we got undone by Gundogan, didn't we, as much as anything else. And he's not there at the moment, and they're coming back, as I say, from time away. They could, in theory, be 12 points behind Arsenal, couldn't they, on Wednesday? If Arsenal win their 2 games, I'll be with a couple of games in hand. So I think it'll be a different City that we'll be playing on Wednesday for lots of different reasons. And it's a little bit more of a game that we can get something from, perhaps, than the previous 4 or 5 visits under Pep. I'm just wondering whether, as you say, you may make a couple of changes, maybe even tomorrow. Not just Calvert-Lewin.
Bringing on to the next point, would you be at any point tempted to bring Danjuma into the starting lineup?
What do you think?
I thought he looked quite bright when he came on against Fulham. I haven't been that impressed with him until then. Really, he's shown signs. Was it Forest? Did he score against Forest in the league early in the season?
No, he scored against Sheffield United. Again, he was probably someone who was a little bit hard done by circumstance. Like Beto, he came. I can't remember if he came on, or he was certainly Beto came on and scored against Doncaster in the Carabao Cup, and obviously Danjuma also scored. So he was a big part in that turnaround, albeit obviously against League 2 opposition. And then a couple of days later, they went to Sheffield United, and Danjuma got the goal for, I think he got Everton second. But then he had the international break, and after that, he had Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison both coming back to fitness. And I think it's clear that I don't think it's controversial to say they're more Dyche-style players, and in fairness, have done pretty well since then. So I think that obviously he's had his chances limited partly by circumstances outside his control, but then also, again, we've mentioned this a few times. It's felt like it's been quite telling when you see Lewis Dobbin coming on in front of him.
Yeah.
And it's hard to read too much into the games where Danjuma doesn't come on, but changes don't get made out wide, because Dyche is a reluctant change maker. But when you get to the point where you have the academy youngster coming on with a very limited track record in senior football, and on games such as the Chelsea game where the game is still in the balance when he comes on, at that point you're probably looking around and you're going, that's interesting that it's Dobbin and not Danjuma. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Danjuma over the past week, and the suggestion that Villarreal might be trying to recall him, one being a concern over the lack of minutes he's got, and two, I think they've got their own squad issues themselves. I mean, I asked Dyche about this yesterday, and Dyche said no one has told him that there's any concern about Villarreal wanting him back, and he said that if anybody said that Villarreal are concerned over his lack of minutes, it's not something that would influence his selection. Or his words were, when I asked him, having asked him, has anyone told you there's concerns from Villarreal over Danjuma's minutes, his response was no. And I said, if there was, would it affect your decision-making process when you come to selection? And his response was, having known me a little bit now for the last 10 months, what do you think my answer to that would be? And it was clearly a no, which I think we could all probably gather. So, I mean, I kind of... The Villarreal, so I think January will be a kind of a month where Everton react rather than be proactive, and there might be circumstances in which someone like a Danjuma might be deemed if there's a conversation about let him go because there might be a better opportunity somewhere else. But I mean, this isn't a squad that you can take. You can shed players on the off chance you might get someone else. Obviously they paid money to bring him over here for that loan fee as well. So I'd be surprised at this stage. But again, another squad player. You thought he did okay when he came on against Fulham. Would you be tempted to give him a chance all over the coming days?
Potentially. I don't see Deitch changing his wingers. I think McNeil and Harrison are very key to his style. I don't know whether you could throw him in behind the striker, because it looked like James Garner started off there against Fulham. It didn't quite didn't quite work really. No. He was industrious, but never felt like he was supporting the striker or a chance might fall his way. I don't know if Danjuma could fill in there if Doucoure's not back. That potential, I think he can play through the middle. Yeah, well,
he played that support striker role is a role that he's played in the past, and thought he might be quite effective at it this season. And obviously the other opportunity is do something which I know Gav would be a fan of, and that's try and move Harrison more into that role. And your only real solution to that, I mean, there are other options as well if you were to go play players that position like James Garner, but you could obviously then put Danjuma on the wing to counter for Harrison moving infield.
I suppose you could, yeah. I guess, Gav, if that's your idea.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Harrison playing behind, when behind the front man.
You're going to bed tonight. Obviously, this is Friday, the game's tomorrow, and your dream, isn't it, is a high Spurs backline on the halfway line, a cute little Jack Harrison through ball to the onrushing Beto.
Absolutely.
That's it, isn't it?
That's it. All my Christmases, Christmas Day, 2 days early. But yeah, at the same time, that's what I would have done on Tuesday, by the way. I wouldn't really get the logic of a game at home against Fulham where it's 90 minutes where you've got to win. And playing three offensive players, then going to Spurs, who've got a wealth of attacking talent, and playing 4 offensive players. I don't get that logic. Albeit, I think it makes a lot of sense. The thing about Danjuma as well, which is the other angle, is going back to Spurs might be a motivating tool for him. I'd be saying, he had a tough time here last year. They were very nice to really, go and show what you can do.
And Richarlison spent the whole time taking the mick out of him for letting Everton down.
Yeah. So that's not the worst motivational tool to use. So it just needs a little bit of freshening up, even if it's just tomorrow. As I say, it's a game where, if you get something on, great, but it's not. I'm not going to die in a ditch if we have a narrow defeat, and it just give somebody a little bit of minutes. I think just get the. As I say, I was having a look before. I think we played 21 games this season. I think 8 players have featured in 17 of those games, and that's a lot of. That's a lot of players playing a lot of minutes, and we're not even halfway through the season. When you see what other clubs can do, and I just think it'd just be nice just to freshen up a little bit tomorrow. But as I say, with it being, a little bit of a free hit, we can probably afford to do that.
One thing that's quite nice, I feel, obviously we're having these conversations and being able to use the terms like free hit, whether or not we agree with this or not, is. I was thinking about this yesterday. Obviously, yesterday it was 4 years since Carlo Ancelotti was appointed. It feels like Everton are entering a Christmas in a positive frame of mind for the first time since Ancelotti, when he had Everton in the top 4 going on Christmas Day, and then obviously second when they went on and won at Bramall Lane on Boxing Day. It's when you think of all the turmoil at the club, I think January takeover, points deduction, appeals, probably 2023 finances being assessed as well. There's a lot of potential for January to be another significant January for Everton. But one thing that you feel is relatively stable is Dyche's position, and you've got a manager going into January in a position of strength, which obviously Rafa Benitez and Frank Lampard, neither of them did. Feels a little bit better going to Christmas like that. Obviously, we'd rather Everton be fourth and going into like they were under Ancelotti. Yeah. But I mean, this is a bottom half side in technicality only, and everything seems to be moving in the right direction, doesn't it?
Credit to Dyche for that, really. I mean, I think it will be three of the last 4 Christmas periods, the manager's been under pressure, haven't he? Silva actually got sacked before Christmas, didn't he? And Benitez and Lampard went shortly after, or in January.
So the stable one was that second Christmas of Ancelotti,
and that was false football, wasn't it? Don't let a lot give a lot of credence to that season, to be honest with you.
The COVID season, of course.
Yeah, 2021. Both in terms of all performances, not just Everton's. I don't take a lot from that. It's false football for me. So and that's credit to Dyche, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And we need that. And we can possibly get away with not doing much in January because of the the baseline. Going back to tennis now, aren't I? The base that Dyche has given us, I think, and the coaching staff have given us a good base to work with. Maybe not as much flexibility as what we would like, but in terms of keeping us in the top flight, Joe, which was at risk last January, the January before, even when Carlo came a little bit. I think that you should deserve credit for that.
I guess it also helps Everton significantly going forward financially as well. One of the things we discussed at the start of the month was when you looked at that 10-point deduction, you've just said about how previous Christmases has been a little bit of a threat to Everton's top flight position. Well, it felt like that might be the case again going into this January, given the points deduction. And when that hit where it left Everton, they went into that Nottingham Forest game, bottom of the table, remember? I mean, you think how recent that is, and where now they're 7 points clear of the relegation zone. It's absolutely phenomenal. But one thing that Dyche has probably shown is, especially bearing in mind that there's a bit of a there's a bit of a more relaxed January with the fixture list because of the break. All of a sudden, Everton are probably in a situation where they don't need to. If there was a little bit of spare cash, they don't need to panic buy in January. They don't need to try and find a way to give themselves an extra cushion because obviously touch wood and there are still a few precarious areas within that squad where there's a lack of depth, but it doesn't look like Everton certainly aren't in a position like they were last January where it's clear that they desperately need reinforcements, are they? And that helps everyone.
No, I think the biggest tribute I think you can give to Dyche is sort of the momentum he generated over the last couple of months. I think you did the piece, when the ban came in, the 10-point penalty came in, about the likes of Burnley, Sheffield United and Luton will be looking at their transfer plans because of Everton, the impact of Everton's penalty. And now it could be said the likes of West Ham and Brighton are looking at their transfer plans because of how well we've done. Yeah. In the interim, so it's changed the focus entirely, and that's I think that's been a brilliant job. I mean, I'd say Dyche's performance over the last couple of years, the couple of months, is over the years watching Everton has been as good. Over a period of 6-7 weeks has been as good as what I've seen from an Everton boss, given the circumstances and what he's had to work with in terms of getting the performances off the players and getting the results as as good as anybody I've seen in that time. And all credit to him, I think. And long may it continue. And we said about December, but January's not a lot of games, is there? So we can regroup in January.
Fewer, unfortunately, because we're on Tuesday.
Yeah. But it'd be nice to have a double header in the League Cup, or hey ho.
We'll move on to score predictions. It won't quite be the end of the show. It traditionally is pre-match. We've got a few other things to talk about. Dan, I'll come to you first for score predictions, and I feel like I kind of might have set you up a little bit earlier on when I was asking about Michael Keane without having set you up the fact that Mykolenko might be back.
Well, yeah.
If Mykolenko, to give you an opportunity to address that,
fine.
Say Mykolenko comes back into the squad. Are you 4 at the back with Branthwaite and Tarkowski, or are you looking at 5 at the back and having Keane in there as well?
4 at the back.
Yeah.
Mykolenko, Branthwaite, Tarkowski.
And Patterson.
There
we go.
For sure.
Don't say I'm not fair to you there.
No.
I felt like I'd say
if
you
Mykolenko's fit, he plays.
Absolutely.
If he's not, I think I'd stick with what we tried against Fulham.
Yeah, okay. And then score prediction for tomorrow?
1-1.
1-1.
Yeah.
Positive, take that.
Yeah, I'll be optimistic.
That's it. Well, I mean, we're going down to North. I mean, Everton have, 3 wins in a row already in London.
Yeah.
They've done South London, West London, East London. It's only North left to conquer. Haven't lost outside of Merseyside since Aston Villa in August, the second game of the season, which is just phenomenal. I mean, just imagine if someone had said that to you after that 4-0 hammering, that you wouldn't see Everton lose outside of Liverpool until potentially, the earliest it could be is now December the 23rd. Absolutely stunning, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gav, prediction?
I was going to say 1-1. We haven't. Could be our 5th successive away win tomorrow, couldn't it? In the league. What is it? West Ham, Palace, Forest, and Burnley. We've only had 5 successive away wins in the league, only once in the last 93 years. So we're in that
for a statistician like you, Gav.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Really, Christmas might actually come early for you, albeit by only 2 days.
There's a few other stats which I'll keep under me half an hour, but I mean, I'd settle for that. I was going to say 1-1 draw, and I'm quite happy, more than happy, with the 1-1 draw. Because they're a good team. I know they've got a few injuries, but you underestimate Spurs. They picked up again after a few difficult results, but they got some good players, haven't they? Richarlison's started to score goals, hasn't he? Son's, they've got no Harry Kane, who's just like, you must have seen us every year and gone, there's 4 goals for the season for me. It was always 2, wasn't it? Harry Kane 2. 1-1. But I'd be like to see maybe a couple of changes and those players coming into the team and that they do well. Yeah. To be fair, that's what I'm looking for.
I'll go 1-1 as well. I don't want to go negative. It's a stretched squad, but I think that Spurs are stretched as well. And I think I'd be doing Dyche an injustice if I was to start looking at predicting defeats right now when, like we've just said, he's gone 4 months without one away from this area. So I mean, you never know. And I think if a few changes are made, I think Simon Better might be a good opportunity. I think that high Spurs backline, standard Everton and the Dyche. If Everton would score first tomorrow, then I don't think they lose. That isn't a particularly controversial point given Dyche's track record protecting defeats, but.
Yeah, and also the opposite of that, if Spurs score first, there's no guarantee that they'll win. No. They'll win because they've dropped a hell of a lot of points, haven't they, from leading positions this season. At home against West Ham the other week, they were winning 1-0, weren't they? So that's the ideal scenario. We score first, I suppose.
From a psychological perspective, it feels like quite a good matchup, I think, for Dyche. When you look at the Everton squad and the Spurs squad or what it is at the moment without the likes of Maddison and a few of those other players.
Yeah, and you saw the play now them when they were absolutely bombing on in August and September when they look really good. So it's a fixture of opportunity, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Right, Dan, I'll come to you just before we do wrap up, just because obviously you're a news reporter, you're an Everton fan, but you, like myself, were up at the Anglican Cathedral on Monday for Bill Kenwright's memorial service. Yeah. You spoke to a lot of people on the way in, you soaked up the atmosphere, and I just want to get your thoughts really on what that was like as an occasion for those people who obviously weren't there but are listening and want to understand what the occasion was like.
Yeah, it was really touching, actually, in that we were positioned through the car park at the Anglican Cathedral as the VIPs came in through the side, and just so many ex-Everton players stopped and wanted to speak about Mr. Kenwright on their way in. Spoke to Jagielka, Peter Reid, David Unsworth. David Unsworth definitely the most sort of, he felt like he was the closest and sort of really spoke from the heart about Bill and his generosity and his love for Everton. But I think it's sort of, there was a lot of mention of late night phone calls and text messages about their performance and whatever, but I think what shone through was that, as I think so much has been written about, how Kenwright was a man from a bygone era, really, of the boyhood blue, got to own his own club, and just that, how he never stopped being a fan. He was a businessman, but it was the excitement of Everton was just key to him. And Peter Reid told a really nice story about how when he moved from Everton to QPR, Bill took him out for dinner in London and just spent the whole evening telling Peter Reid how envious he was of him because he played for Everton. And Peter was like, well, you've done all right, but he's like, well, but I didn't play in midfield for Everton. So it was sombre, but also there was a lot of smiles on people's faces as they were recalling these times, and sort of it was just quite remarkable to see players from sort of the late 70s through to Phil Jagielka and then the current squad all remembering this man who'd been a sort of constant at Everton. So it was really sort of, as a fan, to hear these stories was it felt like a special day.
Well, I was inside and Peter Reid gave a speech, spoke very well, and also I think when you look at some of the other people that were in attendance, obviously it was both halves of the city were there. Margaret Aspinall was there, obviously speaking about his support in relation to the Hillsborough campaign for truth and justice. Sir Kenny Dalglish was there as well, and obviously you also have the Everton first team squad was there. Dyche was there, Frank Lampard was there. One of the things I probably found most fascinating was that Rufus Norris, the artistic director from the National Theatre, spoke about him, and that's a world I don't know anything about, and I think probably a lot of our listeners probably well, they may not know a lot about, but hearing what he had done for the arts and the theatre, in particular kind of amateur theatre and grassroots theatre around the country was really quite fascinating. And obviously we know that the last 18 months or so was Everton's been a very difficult place for a while, but I think it was probably quite fitting to have that opportunity just to mark Bill and his achievements, and also his his impact and his influence. And there were some very nice stories. It was a celebration, and one of the things that was, as I wrote in the report for the following day's paper, one of the things I found was quite funny, because it wasn't a somber occasion, was that quite a lot of phones kept going off during the service, and they were almost exclusively the ringtone was Z Cars, and it wasn't the same phone going off every time. Which as his life partner Jenny Seagrave said, when she was coming on and Z Cars rang up for the next time, she said, "Oh, that's Bill, effectively toying with us." So, but it really was an interesting occasion. Obviously, a huge number of VIPs there, and probably it was a nice tribute, wasn't it? I think, Dan.
It was, yeah, and I think the stories after Bill did die, when they came out, I liked the most was the amount of time he'd spend telling Hollywood stars how good Everton players were. Or, people would say, I was on the train with Bill and this actor and this actress, and instead of speaking about the production they're about to work on in the West End, it's Kevin Campbell's form, or will Rooney be fit for next week, or whatever. And I think that shows that. I spoke to Steve Rotherham, actually, who said that obviously theatre and football were Bill's two passions, but he never knew which way round they were. I think the service confirmed it was Everton.
Yeah, well, I think obviously we had Burnley last Saturday, and in the away end they were singing the 1985 song, weren't they, going through all the players and that, and judging from some of the stories, I think probably Serene McKellen and Dame Judi Dench could probably name a good chunk of that side, given the conversations that they'd had with Mr. Kenwright, didn't they? So, right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Obviously off to Spurs tomorrow, hopefully have another successful away day with Everton. This is going to be our last podcast before Christmas Day, so just before we do go off, just want to say happy Christmas to everyone. Hope you have a wonderful festive season. We will be here with you throughout the festive period after Christmas. Obviously there's a lot of games, so we're going to be in work and still providing podcasts, but until then, hope you have a lovely Christmas.